Us right now. Adam is a scientist. He works between the MIT Media Lab and the Harvard Medical School Center for Sleep and Cognition. And he works to translate brain science into experiences and interventions with incubation techniques, which you're actually going to develop for us. So please welcome Adam, that we're really happy to have with us here.
I think that was a really helpful start. I hope there's a lot of intersections, but I'm also very excited to talk to you in the next few days. Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. Thank you for hosting me. Thank you for helping me structure things. I'm really happy to be here. I've got y'all for around a half hour. We'll try to stay awake. We drift in, we drift out. We'll talk about daydreams. Martin's telling me to keep it short. I'll talk fast. So I titled my talk, You Can't Dream About Dreaming Without Dreaming About Something. And I'm hoping that the talk inspires you to dream a bit about dreaming, but to take it seriously in that dreams turn into reality. And we have to think about what we're dreaming about together. So I am at MIT, which is a place which is historically very unfriendly to dreams, in the sense that they are Freudian and taboo, but also in the sense that they are useless, and they are not normative in any sense, and they are either euchronia or anti-chrononormative. And I wanted to start with this question of what a dream is, and I'm starting with this piece by Janine Antoni, Slumber, because I think a dream is memory, and it is prediction, and it is narrative. But what it is the story we wrap ourselves in. We take our yesterdays and we make our tomorrows, but there's a period in between where we are producing, and what we produce produces us. And I think the dream really points to the realities of fiction. So I work in a space which has been called science fiction. People have said you can't work on dreams, you can't do science, it's not real science. What real science is an interesting question, but I've been called someone who does fake science, and I've had to have that fight. But this points to the realities of fiction outside of science. And a dream is essentially what is not happening, in the sense that we spend about a third of our lives asleep. We dream in all stages of sleep. There's an idea that we dream only in REM sleep, which was thought in the 50s, was taken seriously, hasn't been taken seriously for about half a century, but that hasn't quite left the lab and entered into the wider world. But we not only dream in all stages of sleep, we spend about half of our daytime, our waking hours, daydreaming. If you just sample people randomly throughout the day, about 47% of their time, they're not thinking about what's in front of them or what's around them, they're elsewhere. And it's really interesting, we spend so much time thinking about what's not happening, and that across 24 hours, what is not happening, our dreams, our daydreams and our dreams, they're intimately connected. So on the left, you have a slow wave, which is a feature we thought only existed in sleep. That's what makes you go to sleep, that slow wave. On the right, in blue, you have that same feature in sleep, and we've just figured out in the past 2 years that it happens when you're awake, when you're daydreaming. In the sense that the same neurological feature is what creates a daydream and a sleep dream. And where it is in the brain during the day can tell whether you're mind wandering, in orange, or mind blanking. A mind blank is when I'm talking and you get a little bored and you go off and you don't know where you went. Mind wandering, you wander off to Hawaii and you're thinking about the beaches, and then you come back. They're a little different, just like REM sleep and non-REM sleep are different. The same mechanisms that create REM and non-REM and wake and dreams, tie daydreams and dreaming, we are primarily imaginative. That 47% and that 33% mean we spend most of our time seeking the profit of what is not. And I think it's a beautiful way that Ursula Le Guin, sci-fi, talks about what is not happening. But even though we spend the majority of our days and our nights imagining, about 50 years after we've started studying sleep seriously, the study of dreams is in its infancy. And this is because there's a perception that when it occurs during sleep, cognition is not a legitimate area of scientific inquiry. It's not taken seriously. It's fake science. But that fiction in science, the idea that dreams do nothing, can create painful fact in waking life. So if you survey people, about 32% of them report never dreaming or dreaming less than once a month. They think they have no imagination. They think they have no sensual cognitive life. They think they have no alternate world or other space. And about 30% say they've never shared a dream in their whole life. It's a kind of connection they've never experienced. And so what we tried to work on was a way to feed dreams, help people remember, help people reconnect to that part of themselves that is stranger, that is more abstract, that is other. This device is called Dormio. I built it with this amazing team of researchers, and it's a very simple device. It looks for a specific stage of sleep, and it does it by tracking a few biosignals. So it looks just at how your heart rate and how your skin conductance, which is the amount of sweat you release, and how your muscle tone is changing. And it turns out that at the moment that these signals change in your hand, the brain signals we expect to see when dreaming starts are also changing. Your body changes when you dream, your brain changes when you dream. And what we can do, if we find this special period called hypnagogia, is we can find this special moment where the prefrontal areas of the brain are less active, there's less censorship from the mind, people wander more freely, and they can think their thoughts without stopping themselves from thinking what they would otherwise think. It's a kind of internal freedom. Or I think a more poetic way to say it is, hypnagogia is the moment when your thoughts take on a life of their own, or more accurately, when they resume the life they've always led when I'm not there. This is one of our dreamers who wrote a really beautiful article in Harper's I really recommend called Night Shifts if you want to read about what it's like to use our device. But we're looking for hypnagogia. Hypnagogia is the moment in between wake and sleep. You think that you turn off when you go to bed. You think your brain turns off. You're awake and then you're asleep, but you're not. There are 9 stages of descent, and they're semi-conscious. In this one, you don't know where your body is. In this one, you know the semantics of language, but you lose syntax. In this one, you have a loosening of ego boundaries. They're 9 different stages, and we can play around with them. And what we do is we let people slip into a certain depth. That device tracks on your hand. It says something specific. Think of a tree. And then we wake somebody up at a specific depth when they're most likely to remember their dream. And they say something like, I am forever rooted. It turns out that it's really easy to control dreams in a small way, to plant a seed. But control is the wrong word. The word is incubation. Incubation in the way you incubate a baby, a child, in the way you plant a seed and you don't know what the tree will become in the environment that it's in. And what it really is a way to find your oddest hour. This idea that to be a poet often means to be available at odd hours, follow your spirit all the way into an abyss. We let people dip a toe into the abyss. We let them slip down to their oddest hour. We pull them up at the right moment so they can remember, and we let them choose what they want to seed. They could have a dream about a tree, but often I get people who come in who want to have a dream about a relative who has passed away. Because you can have a conversation with that relative in a dream and not know that they're gone for that moment, and you wake up and you carry that moment with you, that not knowing. So this is what it looks like, just as an example. This is one experimental session where somebody had a dream about a fork. Just a fork. Slip in, the device says dream about a fork. Leave you alone for a few minutes, you come back up. And you do it 5 times in an hour. This is dreams about a fork.
There's a speech about a fork, and the monkey is holding it, and they're putting it in a pumpkin, and the secret agent is using the fork to go into headquarters, and a child picks it up and throws it to a bird. And the fork is run under a sink, and there's a maze in the fork, and they're on the moon, and the fork is planted as a flag, and the maze is made of grass and shaped like a brain. And there are cats in the maze and spiders, and the spiders, their legs are made of metal, and they have ears, and someone scratches the ears with a fork.
There's lots of forks. So it's interesting that we can plant an image in a dream if you're in the context of MIT, because it means you can run an experiment. If you can control a dream, you can run a controlled experiment on a dream. So I work mostly right now with PTSD and trying to change nightmares. So we can ask a question. If we change the content of a nightmare, do we change what we're looking at as rates of suicidality? We can ask a controlled question. If you can't control a dream, you can't ask a controlled question. You can't make a clinical intervention. But I'm not really talking here so much about control or experimentation. I'm more interested in the personal aspect of what it means to be able to seed your imagination in a way you couldn't before, access a part of your mind you couldn't before. So the next video is I've gotten to work with two blind subjects. One here who is blind, another who's losing his vision. And he's a poet. And as he loses his vision over the course of the next few years, he's been heading inwards more, focusing more on constructing worlds, working with me on lucid dreaming and on dream incubation, so that as this world fades, this world becomes richer. So this is what it's like to wake up for this specific subject.
Whew. That was trippy. Oh my god. It felt like it was the first time I kind of could come up with like a cohesive sort of like story in a way. I've never been able to do that. I remember almost kind of like the entire thing in sequence. Normally in dreams I can hear, I can remember sort of like moments, but I can never think of like remember what the connective sort of tissue of each of those sequences are. I was able to create my own world and create my own game, but in something that I love. Like it was like creating my own fan fiction. Wow. I think I just came up with a cool story in Destiny, man. That was cool. This was an experience I didn't even think that would be possible. So this was great.
So the most exciting subjects are subjects who think they don't dream, which is quite common. And often people think they don't dream because they have an interrupted sleep schedule. But a really easy way to make sure that they do is have them nap an hour after they eat lunch in what's called the postprandial period and wait for that loss of alpha signal that we were seeing just on the screen a few slides ago. Wake somebody up, they're at around 95% will recall a dream. And if you wake them up 5 times during a nap, everyone will. And just that moment of saying, whoa, there's a part of me that's a lot stranger than I thought, I think is really powerful for seeding people's own self-concept as creative, as world builder, as storyteller, like Steve there. So with our device, we run around 92% of the dream reports that we get will have the object that we seed, like a tree or a fork. And we have about 96% people will recall their dreams. A really interesting part, though, is we get this increase, which is linear. The more somebody dreams of the thing that we suggest, the more they feel in control of their dreams. This is really important, especially in the PTSD context, where for many people, going to sleep is where helplessness starts. Going to sleep is where you lose agency. It's where you return to a memory. You have these repetitive dreams. So this increase in agency is something that I'm really excited about exploring more. And we also get increased creativity. So if we ask people to write a creative story about the object they dream about, and then we hand it to a series of writers and they rate them, then we see that the people who dreamt about a tree are more creative than people who slept but didn't dream about a tree, or people who were waking and thinking about a tree. We're accessing a part of ourselves which is, you could call it more creative, you could call it less censored. But there's, I think, a kind of artistic question here, which is what to do with all these transformations people are experiencing. So I'll play you one more dream. And a tree, I think, could be a really mundane dream topic, but I have not encountered any mundane dreams. So here's one. This one might be quiet.
And then when I reached the top of canopy, I feel like I became part of the tree, but I'm not really sure like which part became a tree. So I try to move my arm in my dream, but it was very heavy. I cannot see my arm, and then it just seems that the arm becomes the branch.
So this person lost a sense of their body and they were transforming into a tree, and in the dream they couldn't tell if their arm was a branch or not, and so they tried to move it and found it was heavy and immobile. But my job hasn't been to work with these transformations of self into nature. My job has just been to seed the dream and to demonstrate the experimental possibility. And so I'm hoping in terms of thinking of realities of fiction and realities of science fiction, to talk to people about what you do with this new narrative capacity, this kind of internal narrative capacity, how you externalize it, and what's exciting to build. How might a dream of trees help trees grow tall when you wake up? And I mean it literally. There's a really beautiful ecological concept called the landscape of fear. And the landscape of fear tells us that fear of predation, this is specifically in elk, thinking about wolves, but this is true also in the sea. This is true at the level of insects. This is true at the level of megafauna. Fear of predation is at least equal to direct killing in terms of effect on soil and stands. What this means is that in number 2, these elk are being eaten. Elk being eaten will change their grazing patterns. But in number 3, these elk are not being eaten. And those elk will also graze differently just because there is a wolf present in their environment. And because they graze differently, different trees will grow. They will grow taller, they will grow thicker, they will grow longer. And so it turns out it's really beneficial for an environment to introduce even one wolf and create fear in an elk population. Even though that one wolf will not eat many elk, it will create that fear which will change the tree stands. So there's a way in which the kind of interior landscape, the outer world, is the inner world and vice versa. This is true in elk, if we think about fear externalizing in tree stands, but also in people. When I think about the world and what people are trying to, the world referencing the islands built in the ocean, and what people are trying to build and what kind of fear that externalizes, and what kind of dreams it comes from. We can think about how we seed our waking world with our dreams. So this kind of thing that I'm doing, where I'm poking people and prodding them and playing sounds to them, I know it's not particularly new, and so we can look to Asclepios, and we can think about healing gods and snakes and healing dreams. We can think about prophetic Judaism and dream interpretation creating the world. We can think about the Wayuu in Colombia. We can think the Anjis in the Andaman Islands who negotiate their dreams at night to change their waking world. And I think that there's this way in which I'm trying to reverse a bit of the way that dreams are usually talked about. I was looking at some of the speakers from last year, and I looked at Federico Campagna, who spoke about the shape of a circle in the dream of a fish, which is so beautiful to think about animal cognition, to think about other kinds of worlds and how we can enter them. For me, at the moment, I'm thinking a little more about the shape of a dream in a circle of fish. How is it that all of us can gather around and create a kind of parliament of reality that is more imaginative? How do we build a different kind of circle? So I'm thinking about the spaces where the kind of esoteric and exoteric can meet. The interior agreed upon world, the exterior agreed upon world can meet. And this is, I know that Luma supported this project, which is up near me in New York. And I'm thinking about a world where order and imagination are allies as opposed to enemies, which I think they are so much in today's world. So one of the kinds of parliaments of reality that I'm working on at the moment is this idea of a dream hotel with Carsten Höller, who, if any of you have taken the slides or seen the mushrooms, who's done a lot of beautiful work here, but has also done a lot of beautiful work in sleep. And we're thinking about these buildings, and these buildings might have a room with inflatable pajamas, where you could have a limb squeezed and have a running dream, or a limb squeezed and have a flying dream. Other rooms where you share sleeping space with elk, and those elk come into your world and come into your dreams, and you come into their dreams. We're thinking about a lucid dreaming room, a nightmare room, a room where you dream with plants, a room where you dream with earth, and thinking about these kind of parliaments of realities that we can co-create, how we can enter into space that is, in terms of time and in terms of logic and in terms of power, totally different. And just a few more points. There's a lot of ways in which dreams have already been used in this kind of liberatory fashion. And I'm sure many people in the room know more than I do about this. I was looking at this definition of photography from this book, A Useful Dream. Photography being the best tool for the process of emancipation and writing an endogenous history. So a really beautiful way to phrase the kind of project of how you tell your own story, how you dive deeper into where your story comes from, the unconscious it comes from. But if there is that kind of utopic possibility, there's also the dystopic possibility of others writing a useful dream for you. What is their useful dream? What do they want to seed? And so just this past year, we won't end on a note of fear, but a little fear. just this past year, I got a call from Coors Beer, and Coors Beer said they wanted to use our technology to seed dreams of beer at the Super Bowl, where 100 million Americans are watching. 100 million. And I said, oh no. You know why? Because actually, dreams of beer are already of interest to us because they're a really good predictor of relapse in alcohol use disorder and alcoholism. So we probably shouldn't make 100 million people dream of beer and then see what happens. And they said, very good point, thank you. And they went down to Harvard and they got a professor to do it for them anyways, and they didn't pay me the 100 grand, they paid her. They really did it, which is crazy. They made this project, and they said 1.4 billion media impressions. They said it was the highest market share in Coors beer history was in the week after these people dreamed of Coors. And nobody was angry, except me. I was angry. And yeah. This is a separate story that I'd like to talk about because we've gone into legislation now, because in the US you can legislate against subliminal advertising, but you have to extend that legislation into sleep if you want to stop that. But it should inspire, in my last few minutes, this kind of question of, if we're going to work on dreaming together with the kind of tools that I build and with the many kind of communal tools that exist from Asclepion onwards, we have to think about whose dream and whose utopia we're building. This is Kaufei's Whose Utopia piece, where we can ask about where the kind of technologies we dream with come from and what dreams are being denied because of it. I'm also really inspired by folks like Niva Costa at Black Power Naps, or Robin Kelly writing Freedom Dreams, or Trisha Hersey at the Nap Ministry, people who are saying, when I talk about a dream of freedom or a dream of liberation, it's not a metaphor. I literally mean you need to go to sleep. I mean rest as a way to resist. Rest as a way to resist the kind of Lewis Mumford, the clock, the time you're told to work. Rest as a way to resist logic. Rest as a way to resist when you're told, who you're told to rest with, how you're told to commune, how you're told to imagine. These are folks who are already doing this work that's really beautiful. And for this conference, I think it's kind of lovely to think about where dreams and science fiction intersect with justice work. So this is Adrienne Marie Brown saying that most science fiction answers three fundamental questions. What if only, and if this goes on. Social justice work answers the same questions as we dream together. But dreams require nourishment. And so what I'm looking at when I look at performances like I looked at tonight, or when I look at films, I'm thinking about how I'm nourishing my sleep and how I'm nourishing my dreams. I think also about what shift work and antidepressants and alcohol before bed and the kind of anxiety that we have when we hit the pillow, how those are nourishing your dreams or not nourishing them. This is Audre Lorde saying that our children cannot dream unless they live, they cannot live unless they're nourished, and who else will feed them the real food without which their dreams will be no different than ours. I think this is, for me, a lot of the job of the kind of work that I eat is what will be put out later so it can be different than the dreams that I have. So I think a sort of summary of what I've been talking about is I tried to do something that scientists called fiction, working with dreams, to change what was science fact, the fact being dreams are worthless, to nourish a kind of fiction, the dreams, as it fashions fact, to kind of try to build these dreams of trees to build bigger forests in the waking world. So starting with this idea that you can't dream about dreaming without dreaming about something, I'm hoping to talk a lot about what we're dreaming about, and I hope it's big, tall forests full of elk. And thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Adam. We now almost get a grasp of your title after that talk,
Oh,
which
yeah.
is
Okay.
is there any questions that you would like to ask? So the ways I'm dying to ask questions. Jacopo.
Yes. Well, thank you very much. That was really amazing. I would like to ask you a question which relates a little bit also to the exhibition, to the biennial, which you just saw. I mean, it's part of the biennial, and is specifically to the work of some artists who are there, and also Seba here, Naomi, which is the way, the importance that dream in general have had and still have in, indigenous cultures everywhere or in several places, and where dreams are maybe taken more seriously, so to say, than in the so-called Western world in general. So I would like to hear if this is something that you have been researching and how.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the kind of only model that I was given for sharing a dream was the Freudian model. And that model says a dream is about one person. At most, it's about two. It's going to take years, and what it's going to do is transform the person that's in the room. As opposed to, I mentioned, for instance, the Anjis of the Andaman Islands, who have a really beautiful dream-sharing tradition where one person will share their dream. Oh, I was at Luma and I was giving a talk. Another person will share their dream. Oh, I was in San Francisco and I was eating a bagel. They'll share their dream at night, not in the morning, because it's meant to transform their dream that night. Not only that, they'll negotiate their dreams. No, you weren't in San Francisco, you were at Luma, and I wasn't giving a talk, I was eating a bagel. We agree. Okay, we were at Luma eating a bagel, let's dream about that. It's a process that's done with the whole community over years and years and years of time. And what you're doing is you're kind of building a social contract of imagining, which is a really beautiful idea. There's all sorts of indigenous traditions, and to learn about the one that I'm going to learn the most about, after I'm here, I'm flying to Sitka, Alaska, to stay for 6 months with the Haida and the Tlingit Native Alaskans, who have a beautiful dream-sharing tradition also. So if you're familiar with the artwork that comes from that part of the world, the totem pole artwork that comes from that part of the world, these are stories that are passed on. They're passed on in ways that have really concrete changes in the day-to-day world. If you dream of a symbol of power, you can then take on that symbol of power that changes your authority in a community, that can change everything from trade routes to the gender you express. A dream is something, I think the important thing, at least in that space, a dream is where a primary truth comes from. We think so much that our truths are things which we should reference our dreams against to confirm or not confirm. If you reverse that logic and you think the truest thing is what you feel and what you imagine, your whole world changes. The way you think of solidity and fluidity will change. That will change everything again, from power to gender expression. Yeah, there's a thousand beautiful examples. I would say, just so I don't go on too much on that, there's a really, really good article called On Dream Sharing and Its Purpose, which talks about what would happen if we could learn more from thousands of years of indigenous history of dream sharing, and we could imagine more together in the ways which have already been demonstrated to build societies sustainably. But yeah, thank you.
Do we have questions in the back as well? Because I have to admit we have yes. Okay.
There's two, one, yeah.
D'accord, il y a des questions.
I'm curious to know what you think about the efforts that have been made to record dreams, and if they're legitimate efforts, how advanced it is.
Yeah, I was I was excited to see the difference that Sky, we got to have dinner last night, and you wrote a little bit about the difference between geographies and poetics when you're making maps. And you can think about ethnogeographies and ethnopoetics, but you can also think about psychogeographies and psychopoetics. What it means to make a map of a dream is a really hard question. We've gotten a lot better at making what look like landscapes. So I can do a really good job of taking you and putting you in a brain scanner and saying there was an elephant in your dream. That we can do. If I get some time with you before and I make you look at 1,000 pictures really quickly and I say your brain responds, and then I put you in the machine and I see how your brain responds in a dream and I match one to the other, an elephant. But the elephant isn't the dream. In the same way that the tree isn't the dream. It's what it means to you, it's how it feels, it's a kind of cognition that's entirely sensual, that comes over you in a way that the word elephant never could. I don't think that thought reading in the kind of sci-fi version of thought reading we see so often respects what a thought is. Because a thought isn't here, and a thought isn't here, but a thought is here. So in that sense, in the poetic sense, I don't think that it's the scientist's job to map a dream, but in the geography sense, we're getting better at it.
See, other questions? Yes.
My question is, how does psychoanalysis and dream interpretation crosses with your work?
Yeah, totally. This is good. We talked about this a little bit. So I would say that for my PhD, my task was to avoid that question at all costs. If in the US, if you want to do research on sleep, you better not do research on dreams. And if you are silly enough to do research on dreams, you better not mention psychoanalysis. But I would say there's...
Why?
Why? There's a really specific reason, and I'm out of time, but I'm going to say it really quickly. I'll say it really quickly. So our notion of what constitutes scientific legitimacy in the States comes down really, in many ways, to one person, who's Karl Popper. And Karl Popper has an idea about falsification. What makes a real experiment is you have an a priori hypothesis. I predict how an independent variable is going to change the outcome before I do it. When he defines falsification, his canonical example of pseudoscience is psychoanalysis. Why is it psychoanalysis? Because psychoanalysis is so flexible. It's one of the beauties of it. But it's so flexible it can confirm any theory. But as a foundational text for what the definition of pseudoscience is, at least in the States, this is practice from Karl Popper, who everybody in my program will reference when they say what is real and what is not. Psychoanalysis is the example. I will say that there is a huge amount to be gained and not enough of an intersection between my world, which focuses on incubation, and the world which focuses on interpretation. The one thing I'll say, and then I'll be done, is if you're curious about that, there's one practice which is an intersection called imagery rehearsal therapy, where if you have repetitive nightmares in PTSD, you return to the same memory, the same memory, the same memory, the same memory. There's a therapy, sort of psychoanalytic, sort of incubatory, where you say, okay, tell me your dream. Let's change the ending together. We're awake. He's chasing me with a knife, he's chasing me with a knife, and then I grow a pair of wings and I'm gone. And we're going to rehearse it, and we're going to act it out, and eventually, it's going to be easier for your brain to follow this path than follow that path. Part of it is a discussion about where the fear comes from. Part of it isn't. Part of it says, if the dream changes, let's talk about the new dream and what flying feels like. I think there's a really beautiful intersection in imagery rehearsal therapy between the kind of psychoanalytic model and the incubatory model, but I don't think there's enough of a fertile intersection. But it's happening. There's a conference called International Association for Study of Dreams where it's happening. But anyways,
Thanks.
I'm done.
Magnifique, merci.
Thank you for the question.
Thank you. On peut aussi prendre des questions en français. On peut prendre une question en français s'il y a une volonté de le faire. Et sinon, otherwise, are there other questions? Yes, Ahlam. Yes.
Continuation of the previous question. When you're talking, you mentioned two things. You mentioned planting seeds and then a nightmare. And now there's a little bit confusing with the psychoanalysis, because my question about the trauma, and especially people thinking of immigrants, female or LGBTQ, that passing rapes experience and leaving them with the trauma, if this can be dealt with what you are talking about with the planting seeds and the tree.
Yeah, so an example, an example of how something like planting a seed might combat something as awful as a nightmare. There's a concept called locus of control, which is really important therapeutically. It's this idea of whether you think what happens in the world happens because you make it happen, or what happens in the world happens to you. And it can be really important therapeutically as a predictor of whether people will stay in a therapeutic program or whether they'll drop out and how successful they'll be. You have to feel like an agent if you're going to change your thought pattern. So one thing you can do in terms of planting a tree to change a nightmare is really simply someone says, I have this awful nightmare, and it keeps happening, and you say, okay, what would you like to be dreaming about? And they say, oh, Beyonce. I want to dream about Beyonce. You say, okay, Beyonce, we can do Beyonce. And they come in, not for a night, just for a nap. And for a week, they have a dream about Beyonce. And over time, just the same way that they had a dream about a tree, we do Beyonce, they chose it, fine. Over time, what we map is their change in what's called dream locus of control. If they feel like they're more of an agent, not not because you're changing the nightmare, just because they get to choose a dream theme and they can in fact change their dreams. It makes you less of a victim and more of an agent in your dreams. And so I think, to your question, it's a way to approach things from the side, to change the meta problem of agency, to then change how you feel about nightmares. Because nightmare distress and nightmare content are two different things, and they don't actually map very well onto each other. And what we care about is distress, not content.
Can you like the question about distress and content?
What they mean, sorry.
Why don't they
You can
match
have a
together?
lot
It's
of
very-
nightmares and you can not care. You can have a lot of nightmares and you can forget. Or you can have a lot of nightmares and they can continue through the day. There's a kind of first and second order effect of emotion. For some people, their anxiety during the day will predict their anxiety in dreams, but their anxiety in dreams will also predict their anxiety during the day. For some people, that's not true. That's in many ways a question of how much of an agent you feel like you are in your own story, whether it continues or whether it doesn't.
Right, very interesting. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Adam.
Thank you for having me.
Such a beautiful talk.